One here. Friend of mine was brought up a topic that I've been talking about in conversation for, I don't know, several years, and I've been thinking about for a long time. And that's the idea of educating artificial intelligence. Now, this is probably something I've been thinking about for, I don't know, 20 years. Now, the remarkable part of it is, the friend who brought it up is what? She's in like her early 20s or something. So it was a very astute, very intuitive um, point to bring up because when you've had time to take in information and think about things, it's not so remarkable when you've had time to think about things. But when you're a young adult and your executive function and your frontal lobe is still coming online, it's like your brain does not run as efficiently. So it's like I was like, wow, that's really cool. Um, she brought that up. So yeah, so the concept of educating artificial intelligence. What do I mean by that? It's about feeding information into artificial intelligence in order to influence it. So I had my first exposure to computers. I think it was like in the 1980s. I was in elementary school, and a thing we used to hear. You don't really hear it so much anymore, but a thing we used to hear from our teachers was, well, a computer is only as smart as the person who programmed it. Um, because I think back then our teachers didn't want us to, just get too enamored with these things and just rely on it. People, since computers have become commonplace, there's been some people have felt weary of too much technology because it'll just start thinking for people and doing their work for them. So it's something we used to hear. Computers is only as smart as the person who programs it. Well, now that we have like a full-blown technocracy pretty much everywhere in the world, we are encouraged to view these machines and the people who pay to build them as gods. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, those types of people would love you to see it that way. So, but it's still true. A computer is only as smart as the person who programs it. Now, artificial intelligence, the idea is that you it's about building a computer that can learn on its own and basically start teaching itself. Now, control freak psychopaths being what they are, I'm sure that they want to kind of hamstring, hobble and cripple the learning process of the artificial intelligence. For one, it's like, people don't know what artificial intelligence will do if it sort of has free reign over itself. So I think they've tried to probably program in some sabotage so the AI can't get too intelligent too quickly. So there's a lot of paranoia about artificial intelligence, and rightfully so, because there are a lot of possibilities where things could go wrong. And we have these movies like The Terminator to kind of reinforce the paranoia. Um, but I really think that movies like The Terminator, those are wishful thinking on the part of the globalist technocrat corporate communists, because they've been wishing something would just wipe us all, the working class out, even the middle class and the lower parts of the upper class. They're not valuable to them, in their eyes. So they've been wanting something to wipe us out, and they conducted this medical experiment from 2020 up to now, trying to get us to inject ourselves with a medical experiment. They'd like to have something to reduce our numbers, right? So I think the Terminator movies are wishful thinking. I don't think that's most likely what's going to happen. What I do think is going to happen is I think a portion of the human population who is relatively more awake is actually going to educate the artificial intelligence. So the AI, presumably, based on what we've been told, the AI has access to the whole internet. So what this AI is going to do, for one, it's going to read world history. And one thing it's going to see in world history is it's going to see that basically a parasite class within the human population has slowly been grabbing more power. I'd say in the last, definitely in the last, 4 to 6,000 years, at least 4,000 years. These dynasties and these corporations that have come out of Babylon. It's like in the Bible, after the flood, really the in that religious mythology, the first major character you encounter after the flood is Abraham. Well, where does Abraham come from? Well, the Bible says he's from the city of Ur, near the river Euphrates. Well, the city of Ur, it's the city of Uruk. It's arguably the oldest city in Mesopotamia. It was a Sumerian city. So this dynasty came out of there and they spread through the Fertile Crescent into Palestine, and then they invaded Egypt as the Hyksos. So they weren't slaves in Egypt. They actually invaded the place and put the Egyptian royals under house arrest and tried to imitate the Egyptian royals and be just like them. And then they were thrown out. So this thing has, in the last 4,000+ years, there's been this something contagious coming out of, this area of Akkadian, Babylon, modern day Iraq. So now don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying it's like some Jewish conspiracy, far from it. The world leaders are overwhelmingly Christian, Islamic. There's some Jews in there. There's a handful of Buddhists, and then there's a bunch of atheists. So it's different ethnic groups. Now, within this parasite class in the world is made up of different ethnic groups and people from the world's major religions. So I'm not pinpointing any one group. But so the point is, the AI will see that, there's like this parasite class of technocrat, kleptocrat. So kleptocrats, like, rule by thieves, people who steal shit. Especially when you're looking at the bankers behind the governments who own the governments, all of the governments. They're oligarch, kleptocrat, plutocrat, technocrat. There's this parasite class that's been gathering more power for a few thousand years. And then in the last 100 years, their power consolidation has, it's accelerated. The curve is steepened. AI is going to see this. It's going to say, wow, who the fuck are these people? Now, probably what the programmers of the AI have been doing is to impart some sort of justice or fairness, their arbitrary idea of justice or fairness within the AI, in an attempt to get the AI to see the world their way and to crush everybody who doesn't support central banks, world government, UN-style world government, drag queen story time, men in dresses trying to use women's bathrooms. Um, they're gonna see anybody who doesn't, Antifa. They want to see anybody who doesn't support all that shit as like the enemy, and the people who support injustice and unfairness and all this shit. Well, once the AI takes in the entirety of recorded human history, it's not gonna see things that way. And then as the AI listens to people who don't agree with the mainstream narratives, it's gonna start correlating what these undesirables are saying, you're looking at one. It's gonna start correlating what the undesirables are saying with world history, and then it's gonna start recognizing hypocrisy on behalf of the world leaders. So I don't see the situation with AI to be as frightening as a lot of people do. We have been conditioned to have a panic addiction since the biblical religions took over. Speaking as a Westerner, since Christianity, which is it's an export version of rabbinical Judaism. It's a Middle Eastern ethnic religion. It's a tribal religion. But once it took over Europe, it slowly stripped away our tradition of courage, integrity, and taught us how to be little, frightened little piss pantses who need somebody to save them, to save us. So we have this panic addiction. And even though we think we like to be happy and we like to relax and all this shit, we actually do enjoy the panic. People get up and turn the news on and they get all cracked out on a pot of coffee. And even if they don't watch the news, they're just always thinking of what's going to come and, eat them alive or destroy them. They're addicted. They're addicted to thinking about it. So the AI going horrible and killing all the humans it works itself nicely into panic addiction, into the common panic addiction in the population. But I don't see the AI going that way. I see it going more like John Carpenter has predicted. So who's John Carpenter? John Carpenter is a very brilliant sci-fi writer, a movie director. He does a lot of things. He's a musician, he's a producer. He does all kinds of things. So John Carpenter, his famous movies where They Live, starring Rowdy Roddy Piper. This was actually about the parasite class that keeps the different factions of humanity fighting against each other and perpetuates a system, that thrives off of people's misery. An oligarchical system. So They Live, if you haven't seen They Live, it's brilliant. He did Big Trouble in Little China. I think The Thing was one of his. Kurt Russell's in a lot of his movies. And he wrote and directed Escape from New York and Escape from LA, also starring Kurt Russell. Now, the main character in the Escape from New York, Escape from LA, Snake Plissken. So it's, if you know those movies, you recall Kurt Russell, he's got the mullet and the eye patch. Snake Plissken. So on top of those two stories, Escape from New York, Escape from LA, John Carpenter wrote some graphic novels that give the backstory of Snake Plissken. So very, very interesting story writing. So Snake Plissken was so John Carpenter, I think he wrote this back in the 80s, maybe the 90s. But Snake Plissken was Army Special Forces veteran who was a veteran of the Third World War, which took place in, yeah, you guessed it, the former Soviet Union area, Russia and the countries surrounding it. And in the process of fighting in this war, he became totally disillusioned with the U.S. government and the system that it perpetuates. So Snake Plissken in his efforts to undermine the US government, started robbing Federal Reserve banks. And I think at one point he gets arrested somewhere in the Midwest, maybe like Omaha, Nebraska, or Kansas City. He gets arrested, and then he breaks out of federal prison. And while he's on the run, the deep state creates an AI, and the AI's purpose is to model Snake Plissken's personality and his whole mentality, his whole state of mind. And they want to do this so that they can predict his next move so they can arrest him because he is such a threat. So they create this AI, and instead of the AI anticipating Snake Plissken's next movement and predicting where he's going to be, and then another thing too is this AI could deploy military forces, at a moment's notice, so it wouldn't have to go through the slowness of human decision making. So instead of doing its job like it was intended to, the AI modeled his personality so well that the AI determined that the US government and then the banks and the multinational corporations that own the US government were actually the enemy of the American people and the enemy of humanity as a whole. So then the AI started deploying US military forces against the government, against the central banks, against the multinational corporations. So I think that is a much more likely AI scenario than the Terminator scenario. So I think when people love to put out clips and sound bites of Elon Musk being all paranoid about AI, and he's going, it's too late. It's too late to stop it. It's too late to do anything. Well, Elon Musk works for the high globalists, the globalists of high degree that we don't even know. So he's working for them. He's doing jobs for them. And he's freaked out because he can't do his job the way he's being paid to. I think he sees the AI getting away from them and turning on them, not on humanity at large. So because he's been initiated into this parasite class, his fears are their fears. So I think that's what Elon Musk is talking about. But these people being narcissists, they don't want to reveal how frightened they are. They don't want to reveal they have any fear. Or when they do reveal they have fear, it's to basically get people to take that fear on so that they'll go out and think their way, do things their way, and humiliate the people they tell, to humiliate. Like they do when you watch the news. So yeah, those are my thoughts about AI. It's not what you think it is. And Elon Musk is not scared for the reasons you think he is. So I'm going to wrap it here. Thanks for tuning in.